Hello, good morning. Welcome to your Daily Hope Booster video. Today is Wednesday, and today I'd like to speak about a new science that I was introduced to today called disaster psychology. So I received an email from a girlfriend this morning, which was a forward of a newsletter that she received from an author that she and I are both familiar with. So this author is called Dr. Tanya Ulrich, and she's a PhD, a psychology PhD. Her book is called Insights, and it's all about self-awareness and self-actualization and evidence-based research behind how we behave in certain situations. And she's especially focused, of course, right now on the global pandemic and why we are experiencing our emotions and feelings in the way that we are and how that's showing up in our behaviors. So she references disaster psychology, which is a real thing, right? There are scientists out there that have been studying the way humanity has responded during times of crisis. And this global pandemic is clearly a time of crisis for everyone in the world. And we are all responding in different ways across a spectrum of feelings and emotions and thoughts. But it's all quite typical for people going through disasters. So I was really encouraged by this science and the evidence base behind it, and I thought we could talk a little bit about that today and the phases of disaster psychology that we go through in times of crisis. I'm especially encouraged by the fact that there are phases because by their nature, phases indicate that we will get through these crises, right? If we can move from one phase to another eventually, that does mean we come out the other side of these crises, and that is hopeful because it means that somewhere down the line, there will be an end to this crisis and we will get through it in our own way and at our own speed, and but we will get through to the end. The psychology of mental health, or the importance of recognizing the mental health of humanity, of people as we go through these crises, has been recognized as a thing, back in the 1990s. There was a foundation, the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, which was a United Nations affiliated agency there to support the acute psychological health of emergency workers. So recognized back in the 90s that first responders, emergency workers on the front line suffer psychological stress and trauma because of their job in responding to situations like this. And I love that even back in the 90s, we recognized the importance of protecting and helping first responders from a psychological point of view. The American Red Cross has developed a network of psychological crisis intervention teams that they deploy. At the same time, they deploy folks to help in times of crisis from a physical point of view and environmental point of view. They also deploy these psychological teams to help support survivors and first responders on the front lines, which I think is very, very cool. There was also programs developed to support Kuwaiti citizens after the Kuwaiti War. So after the war and all the international aid has moved out, the Kuwaiti government put someone in place to help support survivors and those still living in Kuwait that have lived through the Kuwaiti War. I love that. I just love these instances of people recognizing the importance of and support of the psychological needs of people left behind and of people that have lived through this. So all of this to say that it's a real thing, we recognize it, and there are supports out there to help. So if you haven't yet recognized the psychological impact on you, or if you think that for some reason you are responding in an abnormal way or a weak way, in a way that you feel like you shouldn't be, this is a normal thing. This is how people over the course of time have responded in times of crisis, and forgive yourself. There's a lot of self-forgiveness to be had during this time, and it's okay. There's a lot of research out there, there's a lot of things to learn, and if you are searching for it, it's available. And if you are just wanting to feel it and be there and just recognize how you're feeling, sit in it and be okay with how it feels, that's that's real and it's relevant, and it's totally okay. Forgive yourself for feeling these things, because it is totally normal and you will get through them. So let's talk about what you should be getting through, or the phases that you can expect to get through as we go through this crisis. So of course, we are through some of these phases of disaster. Here in Canada, in Alberta, in Calgary, we will be at a different phase potentially than other places in the world, or even potentially other places within our own country or within North America. But these phases are pretty standard through crisis. Over time, they recognize these phases of disaster. And depending on where we are, we could be still moving through some of these phases. So the disaster psychology has indicated 6 phases of disaster. The first one being pre-disaster, determined by how much notice we have of the disaster coming. So in the case of COVID, maybe we had the pre-disaster phase in North America was determined by when we were notified of the disease coming out of China. You can determine the pre-disaster phase, the length of the pre-disaster phase, on how much notice we had and when we started to do something about it. The impact phase comes next, and this is determined, the length of this phase is determined by the scope and scale of the disaster, the scope and scale of the impact of the disaster. So how long the impact is going to last, how deep the impact is going to be, and to how many people the disaster is going to impact determines the length of this impact phase. Then we run into the heroic phase. So this is the reactive. This is where people jump in to help. We do everything we can. We shut everything down. We try to do everything we can to minimize the impact, to minimize that scope and scale of the disaster, and how quickly we respond to the crisis. So this is that heroic phase. I feel like in some cases we're still in this heroic phase, but in other cases we have moved through heroic phase into the honeymoon phase. So this is maybe that short-lived sense of optimism. I feel like many of us, our cultures are here right now, our communities are here in this honeymoon phase. This is where the massive relief efforts are happening. This is where people are doing everything they can to enhance morale. This is, the number of online courses and the free options that are out there. This is all of the content providers that are providing resources and tools and joy and happiness and hope. I mean, this is the phase of the work that these Hope Booster videos started in, right? This is that optimistic, hopeful things will recover quickly and things will return to normal in some quick sense of time. This honeymoon phase is where our shock maybe is still, hasn't worn off, our adrenaline is still high, we still have, a lot of positive optimism for the future, that this will end quickly and we can get back to normal soon. So I feel like some of us are still in this honeymoon phase, but I also feel like some of us have moved to stage 5, which is the disillusionment phase. This is where we're kind of coming to grips with this new reality. Normal might not be happening as quickly as we'd like it to. Stagnation has set in. People may be becoming a bit lackadaisical and maybe feeling like we can't do this anymore, that the restrictions are too tight, like we're going a bit crazy in our environments. Anger and frustration might be growing. It might be, if it's not set in yet, it might also be growing, and we can feel like we're raging against the machine, so to speak. I feel like a lot of us might be in this disillusionment phase right now as well. I feel like if we're not here, we're quickly moving into this phase of, when is this going to end? The shock is now worn off. The stress and anxiety is at a sort of manageable level. We've adjusted to that. But we're not quite in the reconstruction phase yet, which is the 6th phase of disaster recovery. The reconstruction phase is when our emergency responses have faded. People are getting back to normal. Shock has worn off, and we're starting to adjust and reconcile to what this new normal looks like. In the reconstruction phase, action really starts to happen. People have figured out what they need to do next. Grief and anger has been replaced by acceptance, and rebuilding starts to happen. This phase can be anywhere from kind of 2 months to a year, depending on how long it takes us to rebuild, to recover. This is where our natural resilience and ability to jump back up and sort of come to terms with what the new reality can look like for us and start to action some of those things to get back to where we were, or get back to feeling comfortable and thriving in society again. We will get there. I promise we will get there. I know in some places in the world we're starting to see this reconstruction phase happening. Italy is starting to reopen its economy. Spain, China, places that started this crisis much longer than those of us in North America. We are starting to see them enter this reconstruction phase, and that's a very hopeful place to be. It's also reconfirming that we will get there, that again, the beauty of crisis is that they pass, that we get to move through these things and come out the other side of them. It might be helpful to figure out where you might be personally, where your family might be in these phases, because then you can start to get an idea of what phase you can move into next and how quickly you might get there, and also that the end is in sight. We will get there. I promise we will get there, and our hope will continue for that positive future. I hope this has been helpful. Knowledge for me is king, and recognizing or learning about this disaster psychology was really helpful for me to notice that this is normal behavior, that this crisis will pass, and how we're feeling right now is okay and is normal behavior for people in times of crisis. So stay confident, stay proud, stay hopeful, and you will totally get through this. I'm here if you need me. Have a great day.